Hello and welcome to HomeTech. HomeTech is a podcast dedicated to discovering new and emerging technologies for the home. We discuss news about the Internet of Things, home automation, and more. I'm Seth Johnson in Florida, and I'm joined by Jason Griffin in Los Angeles.
Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of HomeTech. Seth, how are you?
Doing well, Jason. How's it going?
It's going great. This is going to be a pre-recorded episode. I'm actually taking a week off next week to go on vacation with my whole family. We'll be out in Idaho, just enjoying a little bit of time, relaxing, hanging out with all my nieces and nephews and the whole family, and that'll be a lot of fun. So we wanted to pre-record an episode that will go live so that we don't miss any of our episodes. So yeah, this is pre-recorded. But before we jump into the main topic, again, just wanted to thank people for tuning in, and also just let people know that we do encourage you to stop by the website at HomeTech.fm. Leave us a little bit of feedback, leave us a comment, let us know how we're doing. If there's any topics that you would like to see covered on the show or hear us talk about, we definitely welcome that. And also, if you could take a minute just to jump over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review, we would greatly appreciate that.
Yep, definitely. Every one of those ratings really helps us out, and really, helps us rank a little bit higher on the iTunes and helps more people find us. So that's a really good thing for everybody, because it keeps us motivated and keeps us going.
Yeah, exactly. So for this episode, something that I wanted to talk about that's just been on my mind lately with work, as most of our listeners probably know, Seth and I are both home technology professionals, so we do that full time. By day, working with the dealer installed, home automation, home technology systems. And so that's our trade, and that's what we do full time. And, generally speaking, it can be a tough business because there's just so many different challenges and so many different moving parts. But, that's part of also why we enjoy it, and also why we're employed, because if this stuff was easy, people wouldn't need us. But with all of that said, I've been running into a number of things lately, seeing patterns emerge across a number of projects where, there's always those same little things that come up, or little hiccups in the system, and the little bumps and the bruises that come along with deploying a large home technology system. And I thought that it would be interesting if we could talk about those a little and just sort of try to break it down. What we're going to do is try to break it down into 5 things that every customer, every home technology consumer should know. And we're going to try to keep the conversation high level. So we're not really going to talk about like specific equipment, for instance, but we're just going to talk conceptually about, what some of the common challenges or misunderstandings are between home technology customers and the integrators. And Seth, I'm sure you've had a number of things in your professional career lately that you've kind of seen emerging patterns. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts on these as well.
Yeah, definitely. We've got a kind of a list put together, and I think that you and I've been seeing and hearing kind of the same questions. And it's not like one customer asks these questions; it's every customer has asked these questions at some point along in the project. So whether it's the time that we're out there specing the job and walking over with the homeowner what they exactly is that they want to do. All the way up to the point where, you're wrapping up and, oh yeah, one more quick question. And, it just kind of comes out of nowhere. But yeah, it's every project I think probably has these questions that we've come up with. So.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, some of them come up early in the process. Some of them come up a little bit later, but because we see these things common across so many different projects, it's safe to assume that if you're out there listening and you're in the market for a home technology system, that these things are going to be relevant to you at one point or another in the project. So we've learned a lot of these things, obviously, the hard way. And so we hope that people will find it helpful and, take something away from it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that learn through our pain, because it's not like this is, the first show that we've been to. This is, I've got hundreds of installs under my belt, and I'm sure, Jason, you do too. It's the matter of, it's just volume, and I don't like making the same mistake twice. Not saying that I haven't, but
right.
You try to avoid those situations at all costs. So
Yeah. All right. So let's just jump into the list here. The first item that we wanted to talk about, and it might sound obvious, but is an issue that comes up all the time, and that is just making sure that going into the project, as you're planning the layout and you're planning where all of this equipment is going to live, understand that the equipment does generate noise and it does make heat. Because it makes heat, like all of these components pretty much have fans built into them, and then oftentimes your integrator is also going to be adding fans to the rack, or maybe a ceiling fan like you would see in a bathroom or something along those lines, in the closet to pull all of that hot air out. And it seems kind of like common sense, but I think people can underestimate just how much noise those fans can actually make. And so it's really critical when you're planning where that rack is going to live, that you think about that, because a lot of times what ends up happening is your integrator might know that, and they might push to get, as you're planning it, and this is more common like in a new build situation as opposed to a retrofit where you're kind of boxed in. In a new build, you're often early enough in the process that we can basically try to dictate where that equipment is going to live, but oftentimes there are considerations with space. Architects and designers that we work with a lot in the high end will sometimes want to drive that decision. And a lot of times it can end up with sort of a compromised solution where the rack is getting placed, for instance, in a closet, like in a bedroom hallway, as opposed to maybe downstairs, maybe out by the garage or somewhere else where noise wouldn't have been such a concern.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking about this, and I have two projects. One's a new build, one's a retrofit that we'll be, doing in the next 2 or 3 weeks here. The new build, we were slated to go into this beautiful equipment closet. It had 2 air handlers in it, plenty of room, and someone, I'm not saying who, but probably the owner, found out that they had that extra space, and we got booted out of there in favor of, Christmas decorations and storage, which is completely understandable. I mean, it's their house. Mm-hmm. But we ended up in a small closet for a pretty massive rack. So the builder, came along and said, "Oh, we'll put an 8-foot door on this thing." That's great, but I need to get heat out of this closet if we're going to put everything in one rack and make it vertical. And yeah, you can put the fan in the top of the closet. That's not a problem. But one thing you really have to make sure you do is have adequate ventilation coming in. The air has to be able to come in just as easily as it can go out. And that's a pretty big, important thing. A fan that you install in the closet will not pull a vacuum. It will not do that at all. So it has to be able to pull fresh air in, and the exhaust air has to go out just as easily. And that's a pretty major thing. The other retrofit is in a cabinet, and kind of have the same problem there, but we can kind of do some cabinet modifications and push the doors off their hinges a little bit, where it has a little bit more edge around the sides of the cabinets, and it can pull in the fresh air that way. But yeah, that's what I see most of the time are people that, they just seal everything up and put the fans in, and they don't think about that fresh air makeup that you have to have just as much air coming in as you have going out.
Yeah, that gets overlooked a lot. And in, like you mentioned, in a cabinet, it's fairly simple. Usually, like underneath the toe kick, you can kind of a series of holes along there, and you generally want to try to pull that cool air in from down low, and let the fan inside of the cabinet push that hot air out the top. And it sounds very simple, but the challenge is just doing it in a way that doesn't sacrifice the aesthetics of your cabinet as well. And that's a lot of times the trade-off and the consideration that we have to deal with as professional integrators who work in high-end homes. You could have like a super expensive, custom-made cabinet, and you got to put an AV receiver and a cable box and a couple of other devices inside of there. And it's not as simple as just saying, okay, well, give us a vent out of the top, because it's
or a cloth door. Oh, we'll put a cloth door on it. Oh, it's still a door.
Exactly. So, it's a trade-off, and it's really important to consider that. And that goes back to a previous episode we did where we talked about some of the advantages between distributed video system and like a decentralized system. So that's a great example of why a distributed video system is convenient, is because of these considerations that we're talking about with heat and fan noise. You can consolidate those issues down basically to one area of the house, which is wherever your rack lives and all of your video sources are. And then you don't have to worry about, planning around these issues in multiple rooms of your house. But, one way or another, wherever that equipment lives, it is going to have to stay cool. And a lot of times on the new builds, the ones that really come off, for us at least, and you guys might have a different approach, and I'd be curious to hear this, but the ones that really come off the smoothest, where we have the fewest issues with heat and fan noise, are where the builder really understands and gets what we're trying to accomplish, and they will consult with the HVAC contractor to ensure proper ventilation for the mechanical room or for the the head end. So I think that's important for people to understand, because a lot of times they look at us like we're the AV guys, we're selling them the gear. It should be our responsibility to keep it cool. And we look at it as, well, it's our responsibility to consult and make sure that everybody understands the requirements. But really, when you're talking about especially a high end and a very large system, we oftentimes want to bring in an HVAC specialist to really ensure that it gets done properly.
Right. And I kind of agree. I've done those. Have you ever done the BTU hour calculations based on the watt? Yeah. So there's a formula that you can use, and we can link to one in the show notes, that you can use to convert the wattage of the equipment over to BTU hours, which are what the air conditioner, the HVAC guy will need to know how much to pull out of the room.
Yep.
And it's not as easy as adding a vent into the room, because that's great during the summer when the air conditioner's on, but as soon as the winter comes along, you're going to be pumping 130 degree air in a closet that's already got really hot equipment. So that's bad. You don't want to put a vent in. You want to make sure there's an exhaust in there and that it can actively pull that air out. I've seen that. I don't know. Have you seen that done a lot, where they just say, "Oh, we'll just put a vent in there; it'll be fine"?
Yeah, well, I've seen it. I've seen it suggested a lot. It's a very common suggestion. But as soon as you mention that, it's like you see the light bulb go on, and it's an easy thing to overlook. But yeah, it's not. When you're adding a vent, you're also adding heating as well. It just depends on what the air handler that vent goes back to is doing. So yeah, you can't just simply add a vent. You have to take that into consideration. So, and again, that typically applies on the higher end, the larger systems. If we're just talking about a little cabinet with an AV receiver and maybe a house audio amp and things like that, get a couple of low voltage fans. Make sure you have makeup air coming in down low, like you talked about, and you're all set. So really how complicated this gets depends greatly on the size of your system.
No, definitely. But at the same time, it'll also, there's also a consideration, those cable boxes. If you have a cable box, I think I've clocked those in at like 120 degrees before. So they get toaster oven hot. And if you put them in any kind of cabinetry, it's going to be warm in there. It's going to cook everything else, and it'll be bad. So you want to avoid stacking cable boxes up, and stacking equipment on top of cable boxes is a big no-no. You don't want to have anything on top of a cable box. Especially, this used to be a problem with the DVD players, where most people, the DVD players are smaller than the cable box. So I'd see even my guys would come in and they'd put a DVD player right on top of a cable box.
Sure.
And it would last all of 3 months, and they'd be buying a new DVD player. And now it's gone to Blu-rays. Those are even smaller, so you think you can stack those on top of whatever. Right. The equipment's not designed to do that. It's designed to be free and open. So
a lot of considerations there. We won't stick on that one anymore, but just important to understand, like when you go into this process, that heat and fan noise are going to be, or I should say, could potentially be an issue. And so you just need to make sure that if you're doing the project yourself, you're planning for that, or if you're working with an integrator, that they're planning for it, and also that they're, that integrator is getting what they need back from maybe the contractor or the HVAC contractor.
Yeah, definitely. And I do want to mention that I had a contractor that does get it, and he tried to help me out by putting some high voltage fans in. Mm-hmm. And the problem with those were they spin so fast, and the faster the fans go, that's when you start hearing them. So the low voltage fans are the ones you can crank down the speed on and make them go really slow, and they'll move roughly this. They'll move less air, but they'll be going slower, and the slower they go, the less noise they make. Mm-hmm. So I ended up having to replace the high voltage fans he put in with some low volt fans, which, it worked out just fine. No complaints.
Yeah, and that's a good point. There's a ton of different options out there where you can get like temperature sensors where the fans will only run above a certain temperature, or sensors where the fan speed will be variable based on the heat. It'll turn up as it gets hotter. And those are great tools as well to minimize that fan noise while still keeping the heat in check.
Yeah, we can probably link to a couple of those in the show notes just to give people some ideas of what we're talking about.
One of the other things that we wanted to talk about here is the importance of investing in your network. And again, this is one of those things that sounds pretty obvious when I say it, but a lot of times it just gets overlooked. And it's not one of those things that people really devote, I feel like, the necessary time into understanding. And it's not even just about a dollar investment with networking. It's about planning the sort of structure and layout of your network. A particular example that comes to mind for me is planning the location of your wireless access points, or WAPs. And where those WAPs go in the house oftentimes can get overlooked if you don't plan it. And then what you end up having to do is, you're putting your wireless access points down low in cabinets with a bunch of other electronics, or maybe off in corners of the house as opposed to more centralized locations. So what you really want to do going into the job at the beginning is plan the locations of those access points so that you're getting a nice even coverage throughout the house. If it's a multiple floor residence, you need to make sure you have, your access points distributed somewhat evenly, and obviously it'll depend a little bit on the house. And generally speaking, you want to get them up high. So a lot of times the best places that we'll look to put those wireless access points are like in closets up high. In the casework, we'll mount them up to the ceiling, and that sort of thing. So just generally planning the layout of your network and the location of your access points is hugely important.
Yeah, I'm thinking of two projects in my head right now. Again, one of them we're kind of wrapping up on right now, and for whatever reason, we didn't take into account one corner of the house that may need networking to it. And lo and behold, when we get to the trim, where we put the access points, they just don't quite reach that edge of the house. And that could have been avoided. And it's like a formal dining room, so it's really not that big of a deal. But as you know, Jason, it probably will be.
Yeah.
So like you just have to plan for all these edge cases, and for whatever reason, the homeowner will probably set up an office in the formal dining room, and they can't get Wi-Fi there, and it's a problem. But
then it's a big problem.
Yeah, exactly. So, we were able to find some high-powered access points and put them close enough to where we've gotten some pretty good signal in that room now, and we don't have to worry about it. But it would have been a whole lot easier just to have to a nearby closet a Cat 5, like you said, on the ceiling or up high in the closet. No one would have ever noticed, and it's just a perfect place for one to go, because it's usually in a closet. It's free from any type of obstructions, like metal refrigerators and that kind of thing, devices that could interfere with Wi-Fi signal. So yeah, that's my only, the other project I'm thinking of, we thought of it ahead of time. We put them in closets, and when we go to trim, the house is going to be completely covered. We won't have to worry about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things. And a lot of times, again, if you're working in a retrofit environment or an existing home, your options might be a lot more limited. But in terms of a new build, yeah, you generally want to look, up high in closets, like we said. One of the things to be aware of when you're planning your access point locations is also power. And on a lot of the nicer wireless access points, they come with PoE, power over Ethernet, which is super convenient from an installation perspective, because it means that all you need running to that location is simply your Cat 5 or your Cat 6. That Cat 6 will actually power up the access point, meaning you don't need an electrical outlet there. So that makes it really convenient, especially in a retrofit environment. If you just want to maybe retrofit some of your own low voltage cabling, you don't want to have to call an electrician over to add an outlet where you want to put your access point. PoE is very useful for that. The thing to be mindful of with that is that most, but not all, PoE access points will come with a PoE injector, which basically looks typically like a little wall-wart power supply that you have to plug in at the head end, so back where your rack is or back wherever the switch is located. But not all of them come with that, so sometimes the PoE injector is something that you'll need to get separately, or they make PoE switches. So you'll see network switches out on the market that typically are significant cost difference on like a per port basis. The PoE switches are going to be generally more expensive, but again, it's a convenience thing. And with that, you don't have to deal with the extra little wall-wart power supply and all that. So you've just got straight PoE coming out of the switch right to the access point, and that makes it really easy to plan those locations.
Yeah, and I'd say that's kind of the way to go, especially on a larger install. Now, if you had maybe 3 or 4 access points, maybe not. I mean, it may just be easier to use the wall-wart type injectors, yeah. But there's also a thing called a mid-span that even on the bigger installs could be a little more cost effective, I guess. And it basically, you run out, it works just like the injector. You run out of your switch into the mid-span, and the mid-span costs significantly less than a large PoE switch, and then you come out of that and go straight to your access point. So it's just another way of doing it. And PoE's been around a long time, so there are many devices that power up, besides access points like cameras, that power up over PoE. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, very, very common. But again, it's worth pointing out because, some people may just be planning to do, I don't know, airport extremes. And there's nothing wrong with using those. They're very easy to set up for smaller to even some mid-size homes, depending on the complexity of what you need to do with your network. Stuff's going to work just fine for you, but it does require an electrical outlet. So just understanding the difference of PoE versus non-PoE is important for planning purposes.
Oh man, how nice would it be if those airport extremes were PoE?
Oh, be amazing.
Yeah, because they like you said, they're really easy to set up. Use that Apple airport configuration utility. It's all graphical. You kind of have to do a little bit of research to know how to set them up correctly, but otherwise, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think they're great. Now, the IT guys that I work with they're probably screaming at their iPhones right now if they're hearing me say this. But, that's the IT guys. They have their reasons. There are differences. There definitely are differences between, the airport stuff and like a high-end wireless access point from a company like Ruckus, which is what we use on pretty much all of our big jobs. And they're two totally different animals. But again, it's just a case-by-case deal, and it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, we've had a lot of good luck with a company called Ubiquity, which make a product very similar to Ruckus, although I think the price point's a little bit lower. Yeah, the Unify system. The price point's somewhat lower until you start getting up into their higher-end models. Then it can kind of be just about, I want to say. I think Ruckus, sometimes you have to have that centralized controller.
Yeah, you can run them unmanaged, but to really get the benefit of Ruckus, you need what it's called a zone director. And it's like an extra little box that basically, we should talk about that because this is something that I get asked a lot from our clients, and they wonder why, when we come in and propose a Ruckus system, why it's so much more expensive. And I think this is a good time to touch on that. And it all has to do, well, not all, but a lot of it has to do with the roaming. So when you are walking around your home and you've got your iPhone or your iPad in your hand and it's connected to the Wi-Fi, that device in your hand is only capable of connecting to one access point at a time. So it doesn't matter if you have 1 or you have 10 access points in your house, your device is only connected to one of them. And what happens with an unmanaged network, which would be anything like the Airport Extreme stuff or just any generally unmanaged network, is that your iPhone is going to try to hold on to that connection pretty much as long as it can. So you could be walking around the house, roaming around, and you might be standing maybe like 10 feet away from an access point that you would have a really good connection to, but your phone is basically still latched on to the one downstairs because you haven't gotten far enough away for it to actually drop off. What happens with the Ruckus system is that zone director is proactively monitoring and managing your network. So as you move around the house, the zone director is actually dictating which access point your device is connected to. Much, much more seamless roaming experience, which is really important when you're using an iPhone or an iPad to control, say, like a distributed audio system. A lot of times you're walking around the house, maybe getting ready in the morning or whatever it is you're doing, and having that seamless handoff between access points really shines in that instance and makes a big difference.
Yeah, I've seen that happen a number of times. And one major thing to realize is that if your iPhone or your Android phone or whatever is across the house and connected to your access point, and you only have one in the house, say, your entire network is going to degrade. Now there are some technologies like multiple in, multiple out that will help with this, but your entire network will slow down so that iPhone or Android phone or whatever mobile device you have that has a really low signal will be on the same speed as everything else. So it doesn't matter that your computer is sitting right next to your router. You're going to get the same speed as the mobile device. It's clear across the house. It's just mucking everything up right now. And if you try and stream something to your Apple TV, your Apple TV could be the problem. Who knows? That the low signal is going to be what gets the priority because the whole system has to slow down to just get to that. And I think with Ruckus, they've got some technology that helps out with that, with their zone director. And I know that some of the higher end consumer-based routers have technology built into them now that help out with that. But it's just something you want to be mindful of. Even if you were to put a new access point in the other room, if your mobile device was still connected to that first access point, it just won't let go until it just has zero signal left. It's really weird. The roaming capabilities of mobile devices just aren't all that great. So having that roaming is pretty big especially in a larger home or even in a house where you may need two access points. It just really really helps out. And the Unify system we use has that built in. I've been messing around with it. I can't really say it works all that great, but who knows? It may just be some configuration that I have on my end that's not working right. But from what other people I've talked to say, it works great. So I guess it's kind of a hit and miss type thing.
Yeah, no, I dabbled with the Unify stuff last year, and it was cool. It's a really cool product in the way the way they kind of have it set up is neat. Where what you can do is basically make a computer that already lives on your network kind of turns into the equivalent of a zone director. Like you install some Unify server software on there, and then it kind of takes on some of the same roles as a zone director would. And I'm sure there's a lot of differences, and it gets very technical at that point. But yeah, it looks like a really cool product, and I've heard good things about it.
Yeah, we've actually kind of stepped up our end and started doing the layer 3 management. I think they just released it, or it's been out for a little while, where we can actually have a controller in our office that manages all of our access points we have in the field. Yeah. So it's been a lot of fun, but it still actually has a beta tag slapped on it, which I don't like very much, but it's stable enough. But,
well, and that kind of segues nicely into the one final point that I wanted to make about networks. And this applies, this point mainly applies to people who are hiring an integrator to have this done for them. And that is, making sure that your integrator is specifying and is capable of utilizing a system that will give them remote access to your system for diagnostic purposes and for troubleshooting. A lot of times, the simple phone calls that we get all the time have to do with just basic things that need to be, reset or rebooted. And a lot of times, if your integrator is setting up remote access to your system, he'll have an easy way to get in and do that. And that's going to save you a lot of headaches. because if it's a Friday night and you're having problems with your system, he'll be able to remote in, check out what's going on with the house audio system, figure out why it's not working, reboot what needs to be rebooted, and you're back up and running. It's going to save him headaches because he doesn't want to have to roll a truck. But the important thing is, make sure if you're hiring an integrator, that's one of the questions that I think I would recommend anybody to ask is, do you guys set up remote access? Do you have the capability to remote into my system and fix things if something goes wrong? Because, it's getting more and more common, but it's still not something that every integrator has as a regular practice.
Right. I'd say more often than not, the systems that are getting installed don't have any kind of remote connectivity. I think the higher end control systems, maybe Control4, Savant, Crestron, those get built in either by the integrator or they're offered by the company, some type of remote access that gets back into them. But a lot of, a standalone remote system isn't going to have that built in, like a universal remote or, just a standard programmable remote. It isn't going to have that type of flexibility in it. But there are a couple of products out there, like iHeegi kind of rings a bell. They do kind of a remote monitoring of all your IP type devices, and they can, with that, a dealer can remote in, power cycle something, or with the right setup, they definitely could. They have a lot more tools at their disposal without having to roll a truck out to your house and costing a whole lot more money. Yeah,
and iHeegi actually, and we can touch on that a little bit later in one of our other points, but it actually reminded me a lot of when we had Jason Hanna from MBU on our last episode, actually, and he was talking about the switchboard platform that they provide with their HVAC product, and iHeegi is a similar deal. So it's basically a platform that iHeegi, they sell it through your integrator. So your integrator will sell you that service, and it's basically a little black box that they go in and they put on your network, and it does all kinds of really cool diagnostics and monitoring. So oftentimes, if it's implemented properly, it will send an alert to that integrator, who will then find out about a problem with your system before you might even have discovered it. And that's kind of the whole idea with iHeegi, is sort of that proactive monitoring and maintenance, which is a really cool idea. But again, it really just comes down to how well that particular integrator is executing and following through on the installation and configuration of that piece.
Right. And again, it all depends on the network. Yep. So, having good, solid network equipment in the house in the first place really does help out. The caveat with that is the word I just mentioned, good. It seems to be a moving target with every piece of it. A piece will come out and it'll be great, and you'll get all these great reviews on Amazon, and then a couple of months later they release a firmware update, and now no one likes it, they like something else, and you have to have this, it doesn't do this, that, and the other, and it's just really tough to tell what exactly is good anymore, because I think people have different uses for routers and what they're trying to do with them. And most certainly you don't want to use the service provider's router if you can, because those are just going to be garbage. They're built. They're probably used. First of all, you're probably getting used equipment that's been on in somebody's house under their desk collecting dust for a couple of years, and now you get to own it. But it's also, they're also have traditionally not been very, very good. And I kind of have the same problem here at my house. I have the Action Tech from Verizon Fios, and I have my Apple Airport Extreme sitting right next to it that is actually hardwired out to the ONT to get me my internet. And you know which one works a lot better? the Apple. And I don't have to reset it. I have to go and reset the Action Tech from time to time, and that's the problem, because most service providers aren't going to provide you with good, solid networking equipment.
Yeah. Well, that segues perfectly into point number 3, which is actually specifically about service providers. Let's face it, most service providers suck. They just do. They're a pain to deal with. The customer service is horrible. They give you pretty much garbage gear. that rarely ever gets improved. It's just one of these things. It's a necessary evil, though, with home entertainment. We all need a service provider. So we need a Time Warner or a Cox or a DirecTV or whoever it is that's bringing that service into the house. And that's this point that we're touching on is unique in that it's really the only one that's outside of your home and kind of outside of your direct control. Like everything else that we've talked about, these are things that you can plan around and you can take action to sort of make a direct impact and avoid issues with them. But when it comes to your service providers, we get asked this as integrators all the time from our clients. Who should I use for my internet? Who should I use for my phone? Who should I use for my TV? And unfortunately, a lot of times it just really comes down to choosing the lesser of evils. And also, it's a geographical consideration. So here in Los Angeles, we've got a fairly wide availability now for Verizon Fios, which is a fiber optic solution, which I recommend as the go-to, but that's really only if it's available, and it's not available everywhere. And then beyond that, I'm not a huge fan personally of their TV interface. So I don't necessarily recommend my clients use them for their TV service, but their internet and phone, the internet and phone package is pretty good. So it really just depends geographically a lot on where you are. And, if you want the convenience of bundling your services with one provider, or if you don't mind having a few different bills from different providers and you kind of want to pick and choose which service you're going to get from whom.
You mean you don't like Verizon's implementation of serving you advertisements when you turn on your TV? Who wouldn't like that?
It is horrible. I am not a fan of Fios TV at all.
Yeah. I mean, I've got two TiVos here at the house, and I've had them for a number of years. But I mean, on a daily basis, we're setting up Verizon. So you have to go in there, you have to turn off the advertisements. You can do it. It's just kind of buried in there.
Yeah.
And then, the guide interfaces and all that, intuitive, and it used to be a lot better, but they seem to have kind of made it worse over time.
Yeah,
so.
I have a hard time putting my finger on it, but there's just something unintuitive and just that I just don't like about the interface. But again, it's one of those things where for a lot of people, they get used to it. It's not so like I shouldn't make it sound like it's so horrible. Like once you have it and you get used to it and you know how to navigate the interface, and like you said, you know how to go in and maybe turn off some of the little things that are annoying you, then it's fine. And you have the convenience of being bundled with one provider, so you're just paying one bill.
Yeah. And it's definitely around here, Verizon Fios, like you said, it's going to be the lesser of all the evils that you can possibly get around here, which we have, I think, a company called Bright House, which is a Time Warner subsidiary, I think. I'm not sure. They're only like in a northern territory, and then Comcast is everywhere else. So those are your two choices, and then you have Verizon in some locations where they have built out their fiber infrastructure. And if you can get that, we strongly encourage our clients to get them because, like I said, it's just the lesser of all the evils.
Yeah, and you get a really super fast internet connection with Fios, and you get not that most people really need a fast upload speed, but worth noting that generally with fiber, you get a upload speed that's almost equal to, if not equal to, your download speed. So a lot of times with Time Warner, for instance, you'll have a signal coming in that's maybe 15 megs down and only 1 or 2 megs up. Not a big deal for most people because really we, as a whole, generally do very little uploading, other than maybe a picture or two to Facebook or whatever it is. But it's just something to note. You generally get really good speeds with Fios because it's a fiber optic solution.
Yeah, I mean, and the only downside to using Fios is they provide that Action Tech, or I don't know if it's even Action Tech anymore, but it's the Mocha router that has they have to have it in every system because the cable boxes actually get their guide data over the coax line. Right. So you have to have their router in their system hooked up to the internet in some sort of way. The bad part about that is there's really no good way of bypassing it. So
no, I agree. And and our IT guys that work full time have come across the same thing. I do know that when and this jives with what you were saying, because I know that when we go into systems where the client is only using FiOS for like internet or phone and internet and not TV, we can take that router that they've provided and just take it out of the equation entirely. But as soon as you introduce the FiOS TV service, it means that you have to use their router, which may or may not cause some wider issues in your network. Probably will be fine for most people. But when we get into, again, the real high end complex systems where we're really super reliant on the network, having something like that in your chain, we feel like it's kind of a weak link in your armor, and something that we try to avoid if we can.
Right. It kind of reminds me, I have two TiVos now. I don't even use the Verizon service anymore.
Hey,
I don't even know why I have this router in here. It's just sitting here flashing, doing nothing. So I may as well go straight to the ONT.
Yeah. To my understanding, if you're not using their TV service, you don't need their router.
Right. We do what's probably taboo for most network engineers out there, and they're probably going to flip out when I say this, but we do the double NAT with a router behind most other cable modems. And there's people who are just like turning off the podcast right now. Oh, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
But you know what? Yeah. It works. We don't do any port forwarding because it's insecure. I can still get through with VPNs, and I don't have any problems with it, and it works. And there's a whole lot to be said about it working.
Yeah.
So we'll just leave that there. I know we'll let the double NAT controversy continue, but
yeah, exactly. But anyways, we won't dwell too much on that. But the service providers, generally, it's kind of a tough call. It's the lesser of evils. And talk, if you're hiring an integrator, talk to your integrator, because they've worked with a lot of systems, and they're going to be able to tell you in your neighborhood and for your particular application what's going to be your best bet. So one of the other things that I wanted to touch on is just the whole tricky animal, the beast that is HDMI. And it's one of those things that we as integrators really know that HDMI, which is, for people who may not know, it's the audio video signal standard, really, that all consumer electronics devices use now. And it can be a real nightmare to work with. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And there are literally like heated debates going on online all the time amongst the integration community about, HDMI, like it's the bane of our existence. And then there's other people who say, no, HDMI is fine. It's just you're not using the right cables or whatever it is. It's like this whole argument. But at the end of the day, it's really important to understand that HDMI is a tricky animal. And if you have problems with it on your system, you're not alone. And it's a lot of times it has nothing to do with the integrator that you're using. It just maybe the particular architecture of your system, or maybe there's just two pieces that just for whatever reason don't play nice together, and you may have issues with HDMI, and you're going to have to be a little bit patient, because a lot of those take a long time to diagnose and to solve, and it can be very frustrating for clients as well as integrators.
Right. I think HDMI works extremely well if you have 3 devices sitting under your TV, and each of those 3 devices has a dedicated cable going to the TV
Exactly.
and plugging into the HDMI port. And you just select HDMI 1 if you want your cable box, HDMI 2 if you want to watch a Blu-ray, etc. Where I think you and I run into problems are with receivers, which have HDMI support, and then maybe not the best HDMI support on them, but it's okay. And I think the biggest problem that you and I have is probably with the video distribution systems, where it's not really in the spec for HDMI to share a video signal out to 20 TVs, but we do that because we kind of need to. So I think that's where you and I run probably into the biggest problems, or on the video distribution side, and with receivers. And receivers, I don't know, receivers traditionally haven't been easily updated, but now I'm seeing more and more have a network jack on the back, and you can download new firmware, and maybe that'll solve your problem. So always check for the latest updates on your receivers these days. They'll probably fix some random HDMI issue with them.
Mm-hmm.
The other ones are a little bit tougher. I mean, we've had this plague here. Comcast, one of the 2 or 3 providers we have in the area, insists on giving us cable boxes that are still using the 1.2 HDMI spec.
Oh, right.
Which doesn't play very well with HD-base-T. So you have to install some, like a splitter in between the HD-base-T balun and the Comcast box. And it's such a headache because it's just extra added expense that no one needs. And it could be avoided by, either, they just need to update their boxes that they've had for 20 years now. I don't know. It's been forever. Yeah. They're just horrible. But
that's a common issue with a lot of cable boxes now, and they're just running an older kind of firmware, and the version of HDMI that they're using it's not up to date, and there's really nothing that can be done about it other than, like you said, you get a little widget that you put in line, and in theory at least that fixes the problem.
It's just another point of failure,
Yeah.
When that power supply, the cheap little wall wart power supply that comes with it goes out, that's a service call,
Yep.
So it's very frustrating to have to deal with those types of cable boxes.
Yeah, and usually these issues that come about are going to, manifest themselves in one of a few ways. You'll see things like, you turn on the TV and you'll get, picture but no audio, or maybe audio but no picture. Maybe an image that, like on my TV at home, occasionally we have an issue where we're just watching TV and the screen just goes black for a second, and then it comes up with the snow, the digital snow, and then the picture's back up, and the whole thing lasts maybe 2 or 3 seconds, and it doesn't happen all that often, so it's just kind of something that we kind of live with, and it's probably time for me to look at replacing our receiver. Maybe our TV even is getting a little bit old, but I'm kind of holding out for 4K. That's a separate conversation. But it's just one of those things, like as an integrator, I know that's just HDMI, and that really getting frustrated about it isn't going to get me anywhere. It's just kind of something that I have to live with, and it's actually really funny because my wife has totally learned now, and she's totally understands, and now it's become kind of a running joke when we're watching TV at night and that happens. We both at the same time will just look at each other and say HDMI, and then
nice.
The picture comes back up and we're good and everyone's happy. So
it's not that easy in my house.
Yeah.
I have an antiquated Panasonic TV that's probably 2005 vintage era. I mean, it's one of the old plasmas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a wine. It's a bottle of wine. It only gets better with age. And when you turn it on, sometimes the handshake that's supposed to take place between the TiVo box and the TV doesn't exactly line up, and it'll say, this HDMI connection's unauthorized. And you just turn the TV on and off a couple times, and eventually it'll go away, and you can watch TV. But yeah, it's kind of annoying.
Yeah.
I don't. That's really we don't say HDMI anymore. We just kind of curse the TV. So.
Yeah. And that's really all you can do. I mean, for a consumer, the takeaway from this is that if having 100% uptime and not having any potential issues whatsoever with HDMI is important to you, then that might be a reason why you would steer away from doing like a distributed video system, and just put local sources in every room, wire them straight to the TV or just straight into your receiver, and that'll kind of minimize the chances that you'll have issues. But for a lot of people, that's just not practical for a number of reasons, and so they want to go with a distributed video system. And at that point, all you can really do is do some research, maybe even ask your integrator what type of components they're using. Are they using HD-base-T extenders? For the most part, everyone is now, but not always. That's something to consider. Are they using high quality extenders? Is the matrix a high quality switcher? Like, there are some things you can do to kind of minimize that, but generally speaking, every now and then your HDMI is just going to hiccup, and you kind of have to understand, okay, like switch to another source and then switch back, or turn the receiver off and then back on, or the TV, eventually you'll kind of find what fixes it, and I guess just sort of learn to live with it. And it's unfortunate, but that's just kind of the reality of it with HDMI. There's only so much that anyone can do to ensure that it's going to work. It's a very complicated signal. There's just a ton of data moving down that wire, lots of moving parts, lots of potential points of failure. And so when things start to hiccup, it can often take a really long time for that integrator to figure out, which piece in the puzzle is causing those failures, and then replace it.
Keep calm and try turning it off and on again.
keep calm and power cycle.
That's a poster a friend of mine sent to me. It'll be in the show notes.
Nice. So we won't dwell on HDMI anymore, but that kind of ties in with the fifth and final point. Wanted to touch on just quickly to kind of wrap this up, and that is that anyone going in to purchase a home technology system, and consumers of this technology in general, I think just need to understand going into the transaction from the outset that this is a system that is going to require regular service and regular maintenance. You wouldn't buy a car, for instance, and expect to never have to change the tires or change the oil, or even just take it in for a car wash. Like, that's part of the deal when you buy a car. And when you buy an electronic system, it's the same kind of thing. And your integrator is going to be part of your life, especially when you're first moving into the house and you're kind of breaking the system in. We've talked about that on previous episodes. We're one of those trades that is going to be there longer than almost any other trade. You're going to get to know your integrator very well. Hopefully you'll have a good relationship with them. But part of the reason is that these systems are just complicated. They take a long time to dial in. And then even once you get them dialed in, there are parts that are going to break and fail, and just they're going to require service and maintenance.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how often this does come up with clients. Is these aren't perfect systems. We're integrators, and by the very definition of the words is that we've integrated different products together. That's kind of one of the things that Apple gets credit for is they have a single line of products that all talk really well and they work really well together. But when you have a Samsung TV and a Marantz receiver and a Control4 remote and a Blu-ray player, every one of these things is made by somebody else, and they all have to talk together, and it's kind of amazing that they even do, considering how well each one of these companies is made.
It's no small feat, is it?
Yeah. So, sometimes there are hiccups, and sometimes there are ghosts in the machine that simply will not go away, and it could be extremely frustrating. And I can understand as a homeowner who has one of those ghosts in the machine. Yeah, it's frustrating when you want to sit down at night, turn on the TV, and watch something, and it comes up and tells me the HDMI port's not authorized. As a consumer, that's extremely frustrating. But also as a dealer, getting the phone calls, that's very frustrating for us too, because we really do try our best to make a system without fault. And like I said at the beginning, we don't like to make those mistakes twice. So if we got burned on a piece of equipment, we're probably never going to use that again.
Right.
And that's one real key fact of hiring an integrator, is that they've been there and done that, got the t-shirt, they know what works, Yeah. So things will break, and it's all you can do to keep them going. Sometimes it can be very frustrating on both ends, and I guess that's what I want to say about it.
Yeah, and I think it's just important that people understand that going in, that's just kind of part of the deal, and we know that as integrators, and I think sometimes maybe we're at fault for sort of assuming that everybody else understands that, when in fact, why would they? Especially for the kind of money that some of our clients spend, they just don't expect they just want everything should work. Everything should work 100% of the time. And as integrators, like, we can't fault them for feeling that way, but that's kind of why I wanted to bring it up, just to kind of close this out, because it is important for people to understand that. And one of the things, there are a number of things we feel like at my firm, and I'm sure, Seth, you feel the same way, that differentiate us from our customers. Our market, the home integration, home technology market, there's very low barriers to entry. Almost anybody can open up shop and call themselves an integrator. One of the reasons that we're the biggest and we feel like we're the best in our area is because of the level of service we provide. Pretty much anyone can sell you this pile of boxes. The equipment itself that we're selling you, there's nothing really proprietary about it. Some of the stuff that we do on the IT side of things, I guess you could say, is a little bit proprietary, but for the most part, we're selling you consumer electronics. You could go buy these from the guy down the street as well. You're going to get kind of the same general set of issues with those electronics because of the nature of what they are and how they operate. The real difference is going to be with your integrator, and are they willing to provide the kind of service and stand behind their systems and be there to pick up the phone when you have an issue? Are they going to remote monitoring? We talked about IHEG. That's just one example, but it was a good one. Companies that are using IHEG and implementing it properly, can have a whole window into your system that's very proactive. It can really diagnose things before you even know there's an issue. So I think it's just important when you're shopping for an integrator to look at that and to ask about that. And some integrators now are even offering service contracts where it's sort of a monthly or annual fee to get you prioritized service and things of that nature. And that's why. They just know that things are going to break, and that's part of the deal. And, as integrators, that's part of our job, is to be there, to help when stuff breaks and help make it right.
Yeah, exactly. And it's how your integrator will react to those problems. Like I said, they can be frustrating, but on our end, we just want to make things work. And we don't want anybody to have these types of problems. Our goal is to install a system that works like an appliance. Your refrigerator turns on and off all the time, but you never really know. It just works. It makes food cold.
Yep.
And that's the way we try and design these AV systems to be. But it's a tough job, and that's why it is a job, I guess. It's because there's just there's so many moving parts, like you said at the beginning. And it is how your integrator pulls in and reacts to those situations where something could be wrong, and how well what their experience level is, and how well they can react and troubleshoot and figure out what the problem is and resolve the issue. And I think that really separates integrators in the area.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think it was a great conversation. I hope people took something away from it, and anyone out there who's considering a home technology system, or even integrators that listen to the show, hopefully took something away from it as well. Like, these are some of the common things that Seth and I have seen over and over again across dozens or hundreds of projects, and so we just wanted to touch on those and kind of give you our thoughts on them, and sort of shed some light on some of the common, I guess, misconceptions and challenges behind home technology.
Yeah, I think all the integrators probably are sitting back with the drink in hand, just listening, going, "Yep,
yeah.
Yep, yep."
Hopefully, feeling vindicated, maybe.
Right. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and Jason, thanks. This is some pretty good topics you came up with here.
Yeah, no, I thought it was great, and hopefully, again, people enjoyed it. And if they did, swing on over to HomeTech.fm, leave us a comment, let us know, and also, again, just hop over onto iTunes and leave us a review. We would appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks for listening, everybody.
All right, Seth, take care.
All right, take care.